I had this moment the other day that I've been trying to find the words for. I was sitting at the kitchen table, early hours, coffee brewing, same as always, and my kid walks in.
Yeah.
Just walks in to get a glass of water. And for a split second, my brain, it stalled.
Stalled? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like you didn't recognize them?
No, I knew exactly who it was, but the image in my head, the version of my child I expect to see, it just didn't match the person standing right there. It
Ugh.
was like a glitch. The kitchen was the same. The table hasn't moved in 5 years. The routine is identical. But the person inside the routine had fundamentally changed, and I guess I hadn't updated my internal file. It was just jarring.
That is a very specific and honestly a very haunting feeling. It's so
Yeah.
disorienting. And usually when that happens, we just shake it off.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I think, oh, I'm just tired, or wow, they grew overnight. We don't really dwell on the mechanics of what actually just happened in our brain.
Right. Because it feels a little crazy to say, hey, I looked at you and for a second you looked like a stranger, or you look too big for this room. But I stumbled across this essay that describes that exact sensation perfectly.
But really?
It's called Watching Change by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha. And I have to tell you, reading it felt like someone had broken into my brain and just labeled all these weird, ghostly feelings I've been having as a parent.
It's a beautiful piece of writing.
Yeah.
And what I love about Mala's approach is that he isn't interested in the usual, parenting advice.
Thank goodness.
This isn't about how to handle teenagers or a sentimental list of baby's first step. He's doing phenomenology. He's investigating the actual lived experience of consciousness when you were responsible for another human being.
So he's looking at how we perceive time, how memory works, and that specific quiet ache of witnessing someone grow up.
Exactly. So let's dive into that glitch you felt. Because Maul argues this isn't just you being spacey in the morning. He says the environment we live in actually conspires to trick us.
Right. This is what he calls the setting of change. We think change happens in these big leaps, graduations, birthdays, whatever.
The milestone.
Yeah. But he points out that the most profound changes, they happen in the silence. They happen in the early hours over breakfast or during the afternoon school run. But the trick is the backdrop doesn't change.
That's the part that is so brilliant. The furniture is a liar.
Yes, that's it.
In a way, yeah. Think about it. The chair they sit in is the same chair they sat in 3 years ago. The route you drive to school is the exact same route.
The cup they use for juice is the same plastic cup.
Precisely. So you have the static stage. The set design never changes. But the person inside it does. And because the background is so permanent, your brain just assumes the foreground is permanent too.
Mala has these heartbreakingly specific examples. He talks about the child who used to fit easily under your arm.
And then one day, you go to put your arm around them, and the geometry is all wrong. So they don't fit.
Or the voice. He mentions the voice. You get so used to this high, squeaky pitch. It becomes the soundtrack of your life. And then just, without any announcement, it settles lower.
And no one rings a bell. That's the thing. There's no notification on your phone that says update complete, voice has dropped 1 octave. It just happens.
Which leads to what he calls the retrospect problem.
The retrospect problem, exactly. It's the idea that parents are almost always operating on a delay. Because you see them every single day, you literally cannot see the incremental shifts.
It's like watching the hour hand on a clock.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
If you stare at it, it looks still. You only know it moved when you look away and look back. So we're walking around with an old map.
We're operating off an old map. We treat them as they were 6 months ago or even 2 years ago because we haven't received a clear signal to update our internal software.
Maul calls it a gradual loosening. You don't notice that they stopped asking to be picked up until you realize you haven't picked them up in 6 months.
That is so true. It's the absence of something. Like suddenly the house is quieter and you realize those repetitive questions, the whole why is the sky blue phase, it just stopped. And you didn't mark the date.
And that leads right back to that glitch you felt in the kitchen. It's a collision.
Mm.
And this is where the essay gets really fascinating psychologically. He talks about the blur.
The blur. Okay, unpack this for me. Because it sounds a bit like my eyesight is just going bad.
It's not your eyes, it's your mind. Malha suggests that watching change carries this specific weight because you are essentially holding 2 versions of the same person in your mind at the same time.
The child as they are and the child as they were.
Right, and the child as they were isn't just a memory. It's not like looking at an old photo. It's much more physical than that.
How so?
And this is a key insight. The past version of your child is stored in your habits. It's in your body. It's in the way you instinctively lean down to hear them, even though they're now tall enough to speak to your face.
Oh, wow.
It's in the way you reach for their hand at a crosswalk, even when they're perfectly capable of crossing alone.
So the ghost of the toddler is haunting my muscles.
In a way, yes. The momentum of parenting carries you forward on that old track. You are physically primed to care for a smaller, more dependent creature. So when you interact with the current version, you are constantly overlaying that ghost onto reality. That's the blur. It's a double exposure.
Is that healthy? It sounds almost delusional.
Malha argues it's not sentimental, it's structural. It's how the human mind maintains continuity. If we saw them as a brand new stranger every morning, we couldn't function. We have to project the past onto the present to make sense of who they are.
But that projection is what causes the pain, isn't it? Because eventually the mismatch gets too big. The gap between the ghost and the kid becomes impossible to ignore.
And that brings us to, I think, the most profound part of his argument, the directionality of change. He draws this incredible distinction between how the child moves through time and how the parent moves.
The asymmetry, I remember reading this part and having to put the paper down for a second. It hit me so hard.
It's the philosophical core of the whole piece. Think about the child. Which direction are they moving?
The word, obvious.
Right. They are moving forward into new capacities, into independence. For them, change is an acquisition. They're gaining skills, gaining height, gaining the world. For them, change is becoming.
But for the parent,
Yeah.
we are moving forward in the same way.
No.
Oh.
Malha says the parent moves sideways
Sideways. Why sideways?
because the parent is adapting.
Hmm.
The parent is adjusting, recalibrating, making room. Think about it. When a child learns to tie their own shoes, that's a victory for them, a step forward.
Yeah.
But for the parent, it's the loss of a job. It's the end of a little ritual. You have to step to the side and let them do it.
Wow. So every time they step forward, we have to shuffle sideways to get out of their way, but still stay close enough to catch them.
Exactly. It's a constant act of rebalancing. And Malha notes that for the parent, the experience of change is often felt as letting go, even when nothing is actually being lost. The child walks into school alone, they win. But for the parent, the car ride home is empty.
It reframes letting go. We usually hear that phrase as something so tragic or dramatic, but Malfa makes it sound like just mechanics,
Right.
physics.
It is the physics of relationships. When one person is responsible for another and that person grows, the relationship has to stretch. And that stretching feels like loss, even if it's actually success.
But we don't really talk about this part, do we? If I went to a dinner party and said, I'm really grieving the fact that my son doesn't ask me to cut his steak anymore, people would look at me like I'm crazy.
They'd say, you should be happy. He's independent.
Right.
And that's what Malha calls this specific form of silence. It feels intrusive to speak about the grief of growth, because the child is just living their life. They're happy. They're thriving. To name your sadness out loud feels like interference.
So you keep it inside, we notice it inwardly.
It becomes this private accumulation. You store up all these little losses in silence. But, and here's the danger he identifies, when you don't have language for this, when you keep it all inside, you can start to misinterpret the feeling.
Misinterpreted how?
Well, if you feel a constant low-level ache or disorientation, but you don't know why, you might decide it means something else is wrong.
Like what?
You might think, I'm bored with parenting, or I'm dissatisfied with my life, or even I'm failing at connecting with my child. You pathologize it?
You think something is wrong with you.
Precisely. You think, why am I sad? My kid is great. I must be ungrateful. And Mal is trying to correct that. He's saying, no, the ache is a natural response to continuous transition without ritual. We have funerals for death, weddings for unions. We have no rituals for the day they stop playing with Lego.
It just ends, and you're left holding the box.
And feeling that shift isn't a sign of dysfunction. It's just the friction of time passing.
There's also an element of fear he mentions, and not the obvious fear, like, oh, they'll break a leg. It's more subtle. A fear of distance.
Yes. As they grow, they move into spaces where you cannot follow. Physically, mentally, emotionally, they have secrets, they have friends you don't know. That registers in the parent's body as risk.
Because for years, safety meant, I can see you. Safety meant proximity.
Exactly. And now you have to tolerate the fact that they are stepping out of your line of sight. He calls this tolerating uncertainty. And it's incredibly difficult work.
But this watching, this hypervigilance, it isn't just about us being anxious neurotics. Mala makes a point that it actually serves a purpose. It's functional.
It is highly functional. This is the protective function of watching change. Why do we watch so closely? Because we need to keep our responsibility accurate.
Accurate. That's a very clinical word for love.
But think about it. If you parent based on memory, if you treat a teenager like a toddler, you aren't loving the person in front of you. You're loving a ghost. You're probably smothering them.
Or just missing what they actually need now because you're too busy fulfilling an old need.
Malha calls it an adjustment of care, not a withdrawal of care. And I think that distinction is huge. Just because you stop doing physical tasks for them doesn't mean the care is evaporated. It has just changed state.
Love is not static, it reshapes itself. That line really stuck with me.
Loving a dependent child feels heavy in your arms. Loving an autonomous child feels different. Maybe it feels like sitting on your hands sometimes. But it's the same commitment.
I want to shift gears a little to time, because you can't talk about this essay without talking about the absolute weirdness of time when you have kids.
The distortion of time. It's the universal complaint.
Mala talks about sudden visibility. It's that moment when the slow, invisible change just smacks you in the face. Like when you find an old photo or a piece of clothing that looks like it belongs to a doll, but you know they wore it last year.
That compression is shocking. It's an ambush. And he explains this by talking about the unevenness of time. We've all heard the cliche, the days are long, but the years are short.
I hear that at least once a week.
But he breaks down why that's true. The days feel long because of the routine, the laundry, the driving, the meals. Routine slows down our perception of the present. But routine also erases memory.
Because everything just looks the same.
Exactly. Because Tuesday looked like Monday, your brain compresses them into one file called the past. So years collapse. And then you find that old shirt, and 5 years of routine gets compressed into a single second of realization. That's sudden visibility.
It's overwhelming. But I really appreciated that Mala doesn't take the easy road here. He doesn't pivot to that, that toxic positivity thing.
Oh, my goodness.
He doesn't say, so you must cherish every single moment, never be annoyed. He admits that parenting is often boring. It's tiring. It's annoying.
He debunks the cherish every moment myth beautifully. He says your awareness of change doesn't make the laundry magical. It doesn't make a tantrum in the supermarket profound.
It just means that the irritation sits alongside the realization that it's temporary.
Yes. That layering is so real. You can be furious that you're cleaning up spilled milk for the third time, and at the same time, be aware that one day there won't be any spilled milk, and you'll miss the chaos. And both things are true.
At the exact same time, and that complexity is okay.
You don't have to resolve it. Mala gives us permission to just be human.
So, if we accept all this, the glitch, the blur, the sideways movement, the uneven time, where does that leave us? Because he's not offering a solution. He's not selling a product to stop time.
No, and that's the relief of it. The resolution he offers is simply a settling, a steadier footing.
What does that look like?
It comes from knowing there is no action to take.
Hmm?
You don't need to freeze time. You don't need to savor it perfectly. You just need to witness it. The goal isn't to be comfortable, because it's inherently uncomfortable, but to make it comprehensible.
To understand that the ache isn't a malfunction, it's just the weather.
Precisely. It turns the experience from a shock into a rhythm. It's still heavy, but it becomes bearable. You stop bracing against the future or chasing the past. You just stand in the present, moving sideways, watching.
Watching change becomes less of a shock and more of a rhythm. I like that. It's about accepting the flow rather than trying to build a dam.
And realizing that this watching creates a bridge. It connects the present to the future. It's the natural condition of caring for someone.
Before we wrap up, I've been thinking about one last thing. We've spent this whole deep dive talking about watching someone else change. But this mechanism, this glitch, operating on an old map, I wonder if it applies closer to home.
That is a fascinating thread to pull. What do you mean?
Well, if I'm walking around with a 3-year-old version of my kid in my head, am I also walking around with a 5 years ago version of myself in my head?
Oh, absolutely. We are often the last people to notice our own changes.
Right. We might be feeling a similar quiet ache in our own lives because we haven't acknowledged that we've moved sideways. Maybe my internal software about who I am hasn't been updated since 2020.
We operate on our own old maps. We might still see ourselves as the junior employee or the new parent, even though our reality has fundamentally shifted. The furniture of our identity stays the same, so we don't notice the person has changed.
So maybe the lesson here isn't just about parenting. Maybe we need to apply that same adjustment of care to ourselves. We need to stop loving the memory of who we were and start seeing the reality of who we are right now.
Update the file. Acknowledge the change. That is a powerful thought to end on.
Something to chew on during those early hours or late at night when the house is quiet. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Pedro Malha's Watching Change.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.